So around 2011, around the time that I left the Marines, I was lecturing in human memory, lecturing in applied memory on the Chicago Booth MBA program. And shortly after, one of the people who'd been in one of my lectures approached me and asked me to partner with him in building a business. And because my burning desires was to go on the journey of building a high growth tech company, then I kind of jumped at the chance. But what was going on for me though was, I'd never done that before. I'd never been on this journey, so didn't really know what to do, didn't know how to go about doing it, and also felt like a bit of an imposter because I wasn't technical. I hadn't got a professional marketing degree, or hadn't been trained in entrepreneurship. So that was kind of what was going on for me, sort of like imposter syndrome. But anyway, it was a great opportunity and jumped into it feet first. But shortly after we'd started the business, I ended up in hospital from a gym injury. I mean, injury. That's kind of specifically. I contracted an infection, which transpired to be MRSA, and this I ended up being in hospital for like 2-3 weeks. And this infection, my whole hand swelled up, and then it tracked up my arm, and then all the way up to my shoulder, and I was being pumped full of antibiotics, morphine, antibiotics, and they didn't know how to get rid of it. They knew it's MRSA, but they couldn't find a cocktail of antibiotics that would actually get rid of the infection. At this time, because I was in hospital for such a long time, and actually just before I'd gone into hospital, because I had this sort of imposter syndrome and needed to skill up and learn, I'd got my hands on a copy of Steve Blank's Startup Owner's Manual, which is a brilliant book for following a customer development track, which is great for going from idea through to scalable business model, essential for startup teams. And so I just read it and highlighted it. It was a very read book over the course of that kind of intense 2-week period where, I didn't know whether or not I was going to die or live, but it was fascinating. It was an incredible book, all to do with the journey that I was on outside of hospital. And obviously survived, and they found a cocktail that eventually managed to deplete the MRSA. And anyway, we had a good run at that business, but the partnership didn't work out. We just had very distinct difference in opinions, in part because I had consumed this information and was operating from principles of not reinventing the wheel and not making decisions on the fly, shooting from the hip, but actually basing decisions from a structured framework of someone a couple of guys who've collectively built in the order of 14 high growth high tech companies. And then was working, also went to work at another startup. A couple of friends of mine started it. Again, high growth, high tech data management, selling data management tooling to build a data management platform for the insurance industry. So Bloomberg for insurance. And I had the benefit of having some of these frameworks in my head, which was which was great. But even still, often we kind of deferred to either the person with the loudest voice in the room or whoever, the CEO, as he had industry knowledge into insurance. When I knew that I knew better at the time in about how to make certain decisions, but I just couldn't articulate it as clearly as I knew I could. And part of that was I had this epiphany, and the realization that I had was twofold. Well, it was from two different sources. One, so I was from looking at work that I'd done on a high performance human potential development training program around leadership, was that in order to lead effectively, you need to have mastered the conversational domain, the language of the domain in which you want to be an effective leader. And so I knew that, like, for me to lead conversations effectively in this startup journey, I needed to take the frameworks that I'd read and kind of knew of, but actually cement them in my mind so that I had them at my fingertips, at the tip of my tongue, and not only just by recognition, but such that I could see the bigger picture at all times and see where we were on the journey from idea through to scalable business model. And so look at conversations that we'd be having as a management team and as a founding team, and know where does this conversation fit in our entire journey, and is the conversation that we're having right now relevant to where we are in our growth journey, and also do we agree on where we are and therefore what we should be doing. So sequencing and coordinating activities and optimizations across the company at all times in a coherent order. And that was the epiphany. So the plan was to use what I know of in applied memory and apply that to the literature in customer development and startup owners, the startup journey. So combining memory palaces with spaced repetition and startup owners manual set of checklists, among a number of other different frameworks and theories, all to do with startup growth. So did that and put those in my head, and that was really useful because it gave me that insight and that overview of the journey and the big picture. But still, the conflict that I encountered was, just because I had done that didn't mean that anybody else had suddenly transformed or suddenly had a new way of viewing or even a new way of listening to me. And that was another realization of, like, oh fuck, like, okay, now I have this wisdom, how can I then also best communicate what I know in such a way that it's persuasive and convincing, and also enrolls people to align around what this coherent set of frameworks does for the company. So there was a bridging set of frameworks that I needed to learn and that I needed to use, and those bridging frameworks would take the company from where they were and align the company both through branding, through company-wide single metrics that matter, objectives, key results, vision, mission, values. So a set of different frameworks and processes to take the company from where it was to being aligned to the customer development journey. And that was what we did. We went through a number of different processes and aligned the wider company and created tools, simple but effective and powerful tools that enabled the company, the management team, the leadership to communicate, to understand where we were as a company at a moment in time, and also to look at what our journey ahead was and how that tied to our growth story, and also to be able to communicate that up to the board and down and across to the wider company, and to coordinate all activity. And these are some of the tools that if we work together, then I will be sharing with you. And what we achieved as a result of that was going from a pre-seed kind of undifferentiated business model and go-to-market through to successfully selling major contracts to global companies, multinational, large enterprise sales, and to do that, having defined a business model and created a scalable, repeatable sales roadmap, and have the company aligned around that, going from pre-seed through to successful Series B, and having landed and expanded from starting in London to spreading and building out in the US, and also a client base in Europe. So that's been the journey, and who I have become as a result of that is who I wanted to become and who I needed to become to go on this journey, and to go on this journey successfully. That was to be someone who has mastered the conversational domain and the tools and frameworks and theories required to take you from idea or early stage pre-seed on your journey through to identifying scalable business model and then beyond, as well as some of the other pieces that I've built out in my armory, which are the defining go-to-market, marketing strategy, marketing mix, and integrating sales with marketing, and the sales operational environment that's required to tie marketing and sales together and have that integrate across the whole business. So if that sounds like something that you want to know more about and that you need, then we should talk. All right, Richard Bowdler, Story This. Bye for now.